All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Sorry we missed you last week, but I'll get into where I was a little later in the podcast when I connect with Chris Newmarker. This podcast is going to be structured a little bit differently, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it. We're going to focus on issues pertaining to employment, finding employees, retaining employees, recruiting employees. We've got an interesting trio of guests today. First, I'm going to speak with Joe McClung. Joe is president of Floodgate Medical, which is a search firm that obviously works with medical device companies to help them find talent. Full disclosure, Floodgate Medical is sponsoring this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. And while we don't normally do longer interviews with sponsors, the subject matter was so relevant to what Floodgate Medical is doing. I started this episode with a longer interview with Joe McClung. We talk a bit about the Medtech market overall. Then I'll connect with Emma Pluff. She is Vice President of People and Culture at Vicarious Surgical. I'll talk with Emma about what Vicarious is doing to recruit tech folks into the surgical robotics field, what tricks they're employing, or tools they're employing, not tricks, and what kind of culture they're trying to build there at Vicarious. Finally, we'll connect with Elizabeth Steele. She's a Vice President at Microspec Corporation, not too far away from me in New Hampshire. They're a manufacturer, and they're having difficulty finding employees like a lot of folks are. So they took an unusual step, and I won't say much more than that. They're going, I think, above and beyond. It's not something I've heard of other contract manufacturers doing, but we'll hear directly from Elizabeth Steele in our third interview. Finally, Chris Newmarker and I will have Newmarkers Newsmakers. We're only going to do 3 this week just to keep the episode length around an hour. So we'll have a great time. You'll hear some important news, some troubling news, and some hopeful news. So it's great to be back on the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Very grateful to have you here. So before we start this podcast episode, I just want to remind you that DeviceTalks West is happening on October 19th and 20th in Santa Clara. It is, as I record this, Friday, August 19th. Our early bird rate expires tomorrow. We've got a draft agenda up there. We put it up there this week so you can begin to see who the speakers are. We will have folks from Abbott and Boston Scientific and IBM Research and Penumbra and Outset and Shockwave and Johnson & Johnson and Canary Medical and Zimmer Biomet and Intuitive. And I could go on, but that's a great start. So please go to DeviceTalks.com to find out more information. Now, let's begin this podcast episode, my interview with Joe McClung of Floodgate Medical. Well, Joe McClung, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So we're talking all about recruiting and hiring and building of culture. So great to have you on the podcast to sort of provide an expert observer's opinion of where we are with things. Before we get into that, tell me a little bit about Floodgate Medical.
Floodgate Medical, one of the premier recruiting firms for MedDevice. I've got a team of 20 recruiters, most of us based here in Tampa, Florida, but all the way some from California and Colorado. And we've been at it for 20 years, and this year we're on track to place over 400 people in this space. So talent is what we live and breathe. And so I'm glad to be able to share what we love here with you, Tom.
Are you in OUS and US or primarily one of the?
Really, really US focused.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you focus, I'm curious, do companies like yours focus on a specific type of talent, like engineering or regulatory, or do you run the gamut?
Yeah, we do run the gamut. Has to be med device specific, right? To make it for us to really add value. In our practice, we'll skew more on the commercial side. So anyone that's touching the customer, but we've really helped a lot of our customers come alongside them as enterprise and to be an extension of what they do, not just someone that gives them a resume. That's our model. So we get deep and wide with our clients.
Okay. So it seems like, let's talk about the state of the market. It seems like the last 6 months, at least according to the newspapers and general media, things are getting harder. If you're on LinkedIn now, you're seeing more layoffs here and there. And suddenly what was like this market that was unbelievable opportunities for applicants appears to be drying up. At least that's the feeling you get. What do you actually see from the front lines?
Well, I can tell you it has been for the last year, post-pandemic, one of the frothiest markets we've seen in years.
Okay.
And really getting candidates' attention. They were getting 4 or 5 calls a week. Compensation went up on our salary guide. We saw a 16% increase overall on salaries. That was from 20 to 21. So it's a 2020 salary guide. But that data is from 2021. They saw really that high of a jump. So it's been from frothy to slightly cooling is where I put it, where you're able to access candidates more. But in med device, we always lag the overall market economy. So I saw that in 2009. We're seeing it now where it isn't as drastic of a change in our space. So we're seeing some softening, but really the news is leading more than the reality in my opinion.
Interesting. So what has been, let me actually focus on that salary jump first, the 16 to 17%. How does that compare to other years? It sounds like a lot. Is it a lot?
Yeah. I mean, 16 to 17%, usually you're seeing 3 to 4, and so you're going 4x average in 1 year. That's impossible to keep up with. And where it gets really difficult for companies is when they're bringing on new people that are making more than the people they've had before. And so they're really having to figure out how they create compensation equity with those drastic jumps like that for their existing team.
What do you think is driving that increase? I mean, obviously it's the need to recruit talent, as you said, but is it competition from tech players for folks? Is it something to do with the recession? Is there any 2 or 3 things you can sort of point to that would account for that increase?
It's a classic thing of supply and demand.
Yeah.
Everyone came back post-pandemic and all started hiring at once. At that time, you had 2 groups of people. You had people that were comfortable and still nervous. So there's less supply because they're not even talking to anybody, and you had some people that, they left early, right? They retired. We heard that in the macro sense. There's less supply in the market and more jobs at a certain time that all came at once. That meant people were getting creative. What do we need to do? All right, we got somebody. Where do we need to go? How do we get higher? So it started just like we saw across the entire economy, that pricing rise at the same time, just like you would in oil, but it had the impact in talent.
Interesting. And the other macro trend that we've heard about is, work from home, flexibility, things like that. Is that coming into play with the jobs you placed this year?
100%.
Yeah.
We used to, a director of marketing. It was like, we need them at our office. No questions. They need to relocate. They need to be there. And now we're getting those roles and different ones. Hey, can they come in, a few days, a week, a few a month? And I actually see, and companies are telling me that they're benefiting from that because they're getting better talent, higher quality talent, and they're still getting the impact. As long as someone's willing to travel and make that personal connection that's necessary to get the trust, to get speed, and then do the day in, day out remote, it's working well, I think, for both the employers and the employees, and they're much more open than they ever were pre-pandemic.
That's interesting. That must just really open the field for you guys and folks who do your kind of work, whereas before you were geographically limited to a certain extent, unless people were willing to move. Now
Absolutely.
Fascinating. So where are we headed? Let's I guess from an employer or someone who's going to be hiring someone is listening to this right now or needs to hire a bunch of someone's. What is your forecast or what advice would you give them looking forward?
If you're looking to hire, no matter what the market is, you want the best of the best, right? Everyone wants that, that rock star talent. To do that, no matter if it's a great market or a soft market, you've got to stand out. So I think people need to remember to lead from culture. People are attracted to great cultures. I think the millennials said they would accept, an 80% of current pay if they agreed with the culture. So you got to lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to be able to figure out how to stand up above the noise. I mean, if you're just doing the same thing, putting the same boring LinkedIn post out there, you're not going to grab the attention of the really unique candidates. You've got to break above the noise to get noticed and then have a real authentic conversation and be prepared to move the process fast, right? So many times people have one more person, 3 more people to talk to, and great candidates are kind of like, 8-day-old milk. It can spoil it, So if you're not willing to go, you're going to miss out on the best in any market.
It's funny that you mentioned posts. We'll in one of our other interviews coming up, the HR lead from Vicarious Surgical talked about a video she did that produced a lot of leads. So yeah, creativity certainly is getting rewarded. How about on the, I'm happy where I am perhaps, but 16 to 17% sounds pretty good. What advice do you have folks who might be interested in a jump?
Yeah, I would say people that are, depends if they're interested. One, learn. Hey, at very least, when you have a conversation with somebody, you can learn that where you are is the best place you could be. So that doesn't hurt you. If you're actively searching, don't treat it passively. People aren't going to just come to you. You've got to, I always tell people, treat it like launching a product, right? The only difference is the product in this case, if you're looking for a job, would be the product's Tom. Yeah. So what's your value you're bringing to the market? Does your marketing material, your LinkedIn page and your resume harmonize with the value? Does it say it easily and clearly? And then finally, you've got to start connecting and making sure that you have a system to follow along when you're connecting with people. If you're not executing on that on a consistent basis, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to fall on your lap. And there's two questions I always tell people ask when they're networking, because most of your friends aren't going to know of a job. Mm-hmm. So one, what's a company that's really impressing you in the space right now? Mm-hmm. Do you know somebody that works there? Because that's what, if they're impressing you, they're growing, they're usually the ones hiring. So you get that connection. That's where you find it. The second thing is, hey, I've always respected you, Tom, when, we did these podcasts together. So do you know someone you respect as well? And can you introduce me to them? Those two questions will keep that networking going. And if you consistently do it, set a goal every day, 3 or 4, you'll get it done, because usually that second, that third connection is where most jobs live. And as a recruiter, I hate to say this, but 83% of jobs are through network, so that is where most likely you're going to get most of your value. Also, hey, network with recruiters. If we've got a client that has a need that lines up with your background, awesome. We're going to do everything we can to make that connection. That's what we do.
Yeah. Do you want people like reaching out to you, just saying, hey, I'm here if something comes up?
I love it, because you know what? We are in the relationship business. We want people to connect. We want to get their information. So when it does emerge, because, it could change tomorrow. We could get that ask for that, director of national accounts. That's exactly what they need. Or so we have that. But second, we've created a lot of material that helps people do what most people haven't done in years, which is the job process, how to interview, all of those things. So even if we can't marry you with one of our great clients, if we can give you an arrow to put in your quiver that helps you get that next best opportunity, our mission is improve lives. So if we're doing that by uniting great people, great companies, even if it's not one of our clients, we've achieved our mission. So call us.
So you mentioned earlier on the importance of social media posts for employers. How about for employees? If you're looking for a job, how much attention should you give to LinkedIn and Twitter or anything else? Yammer, I don't know what else is out there these days.
When you go to get found, you go to a website, right? So you've got to look at LinkedIn as a candidate, as your personal website. So you've got to think of things, the keywords, SEO keywords, because as a recruiter, someone's going to come to me looking for something very specific, a certain sort of engineering experience. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to put that in the keywords. And if you have that experience and it's not your LinkedIn, you're not going to pop up my search. I'm never going to reach out to you and present that great opportunity. Mm-hmm. So make sure that the value you have is spelled out clearly in LinkedIn, that it looks good. Spend the money for the professional headshot, because,
no wedding tuxedos.
We don't need the cutoff person on the side. That's the first thing. We're humans. We look at faces, right? So don't care who you are. Make that impression look good and make it easy to understand. So absolutely, that profile matters. And one thing I'll suggest, a lot of people, they're like, I applied to the job. Cool. That's not enough, right? If you click the apply, follow up, look through who's in there. Do you know somebody that's a second connection you can reach out to? Do you know somebody maybe that works for the company in a different part of the country? Reach out to them, let them know, make a connection, because if someone within the company is able to say, hey, Tom just applied, I know Tom from way back when, he's awesome, you're going to get the call back. If you don't, it sometimes gets lost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the big companies, lots of resumes, lots of moving parts. Don't leave that up to fate and do the extra step, because even if you didn't need it, I can tell you as a former leader and hiring manager, someone that came through a second channel or got to me a different way, their bar was already here because they showed initiative, they showed grit, all the things people look to hire for.
Excellent. All right. Well, that's great advice. So final question. I don't know if I already said final question, but going forward, you said it went from frothy to less frothy. I forget the terminology, but where do you see things go in the next 6 months? Are we going to get back to frothy again, or is it going to be less frothy?
Well, Tom, if I can predict economic outcomes, and
I know
we wouldn't be doing this. But I see it cooling, right? It went from frothy to maybe a little bit of hot white, So it's not. We haven't seen volumes drop significantly, and I'm really curious with MassDevice, where 83% of healthcare spend is coming from the government spend. What that impact will really have, right? We still have the largest population on the planet, all getting old at the same time. Healthcare is going to continue to need to be delivered. So we'll see some softening, but I don't think we're going to see what's going to be akin to the rest of the market. I hope I'm right. I could be wrong though, Tom.
I hope so too. All right. Well, Joe, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Good to be here, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, we are back. We're back doing this podcast. We've missed last week. I was out. We're all busy, but good to be back and starting to hit our stride for the fall.
You're doing the college road trip.
It was fantastic.
Nice. Had
a great time. Visited a lot of great engineering schools. I want to be an engineer. It was very impressive. We went to Purdue. Very impressed with Purdue. Case Western was very cool. We saw some others that were also very impressive. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
All of my little kids right now say they want to be engineers someday, probably because their dad writes about them. So I hope that lasts.
There we go. My son doesn't want to be a biomed engineer, unfortunately. He's interested in space or some nonsense. But,
What, space? He thinks space is cool?
He thinks he thinks sending mankind to space and helping it progress forward is something he'd like to do. But, all right, that's fine. That sounds cool. All right, I'm jealous. I would love.
It's pretty cool.
I would love to do that too.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, they're launching a moon rocket at the end of the month, hopefully. So we talked a lot about that. He's definitely into all that, and we went to Purdue's engineering school, which is named after Neil Armstrong. And they have a statue of Neil Armstrong there, and they got his little bronze footprints from the moon, sort of thing. And it's hard not to get wrapped up in all of that. It was very cool. I read once how Purdue originally got that program, which was fascinating. I was reading Kara's Passage to Power about LBJ, and I guess when LBJ was trying to pass civil rights, like one of the key Congress members whose voting needed had Purdue in his district. So he was meeting with LBJ in the Oval Office. He was like, hold on, Purdue's in your district. Wait a second, I'm going to call up the NASA administrator on the phone here. Like, we're going to get a program over there.
Wow, that's a cool story.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a fun book. If you want to see how things got done back in the day, it's a really good book.
That's great. Way to go, LBJ.
Yeah.
That was awesome. All right. Well, we are, as I said, back at it. We'll have 3 interviews today. We'll be looking at various aspects of hiring and recruiting. But before we get into all of that very important talk, we're going to hit upon our
the Newmarkers Newsmakers.
Thank you. I was doing my best so I could try again, but you
Peter
took over
Piper
for me.
Picked a peck.
Just to let folks know, we're gonna change things up a bit. We'll do 3 newsmakers this week, but I think 3 powerhouse stories from the pages of MassDevice and Medical Design and Outsourcing will do these podcasts just fine. So
the greatest hits. We're not doing this because it's the middle of the summer and earnings season just ended. We're doing this because we want to hit you with impactful stories.
Exactly. And this is not a supply chain issue. We have an abundance of supplies of great stories on MassDevice. So can't blame the supply chain.
We have a glut of good Medtech news stories on MassDevice right now.
It's like Thanksgiving feast on those pages. Just like, I couldn't have it. Oh, that looks really good.
Pass the cranberry sauce. We got it.
And there's always room for more MassDevice stories, just like there's always room for Jell-O. What is number 3 on the Newmarkers Newsmakers, Chris?
Well, number 3 on the list, we've got now we got to get serious. Actually, this is some tough news that we got here. But
Yep.
There's a federal judge in New Jersey is allowing part of a shareholder lawsuit to proceed against BD and CEO Thomas Pollan over how they the lawsuits over how the company communicated its performance, as its Alaris infusion pump recall got increasingly serious, and and it's still going on. FDA requires them to get a 510(k) cleared on the software upgrades before they start selling new pumps. It's still going on. Well, that hold remains in place. New shipments of the pumps, 2.5 years later, and in the company's in a recent earnings call, Pollan said they don't expect a clearance during the present fiscal year, which ends September 30th. So it's still ongoing, but now it looks like we got a shareholder lawsuit moving forward in federal court in New Jersey, over communications, saying they should have, basically they should have been getting some more warning about what was going on with this.
Oh well, Chris Newmarker, I heard someone let some air out on your side of the audio, but it sounds like what was it, a truck or something there that air brakes? What's going on?
I have both of my neighbors on the street on each side have been expanding their houses.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yes, and there's another house farther down the street that caught fire a few months ago. Everybody was fine in it, but they're getting going on repairing that too. So it's one happy construction zone around my house right now. So I'm seeing a giant truck pulling up with plywood and a crane. So,
all right,
good times.
Right. So that's difficult news, and actually, all the Newmarkers Newsmakers this week actually has a bit of good news and bad for Medtech. But let's get into some good news before we finish off with a little unfortunate news. Actually, considerably unfortunate news.
I mean, this is some better news here. I mean, we've got GE Healthcare was leading a Series F funding round for AliveCor for their wearable, ECG, tracking tech. So, and along with the, funding, this just comes months after GE Healthcare announced a partnership with AliveCor, where, AliveCor's CardioMobile 6L ECG device, can now send data directly to GE Healthcare's Muse cardiac management system. So increasing partnership between AliveCor and GE Healthcare, and what's really been a hot space. I mean, you got this whole host of companies, iRhythm, Baxter's Barty Diagnostics, AliveCor. They're all, working on like these wearable ECG cardiac monitors that, could be like a better alternative to these bulky traditional holder monitors out there that you've had your doctor strapped onto you, if he's suspecting AFib, and wants to find out what's going on. So like increasing partnership with, GE Healthcare seems to be making, a play in this space, with, a partnership and now funding for AliveCor.
Yeah, and GE Healthcare, of course, spun out recently, and now it's out doing business apparently, making investments in companies. So,
well, they're in the process of spinning out. But
in the process, yes. Yeah. Thank you for slowing my roll, Chris Newmarker.
But they're going to be an independent company. So doing a lot of stuff, doing a lot of really huge partnerships.
Excellent. Well, Emma Pluff, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Tom.
Excited to have Vicarious Surgical back. We had your CEO on way back in the early days of the podcast and unfortunately the pandemic. And your company has grown a lot since that first conversation. So that's the intent of this conversation, is to sort of understand how you've grown culture-wise and employee-wise. So before we get into that, though, I'd like to understand your background a bit. This is your first job, and this is kind of a trick question. I want to say this is your first job in Medtech, because that's what I normally ask people. But layered in that question, I have to ask, do you see Vicarious Surgical as a tech company or as a Medtech company? Or am I parsing too much?
Yeah, no, great question. I see it as a medical device company, but actually one of the ways that I talk about Vicarious Surgical is sort of at the intersection of tech, because we have this cool robotics piece and medical device. So if I had to pick one category, I would say medical device, but certainly when I'm talking about it, I actually reference it as almost like in both categories, which is a pretty unique place to be.
Absolutely. And that's why you're here. And I agree with you. And it's great too, I think, because for so long, it seemed like surgical systems were being developed by medical device companies. And it was great to see sort of robotic companies come into the medical device field and bring their expertise from other industries as well. So how did you find your way to Vicarious? And just give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is my first time in medtech. That said, I started off my career in biotech. And so that was my first exposure to working at a truly mission-driven company where you're helping patients. And there's, a sort of magic that comes with being in the pharma, biotech, healthcare, medtech space. And so I experienced that very early on in my career. From there, I sort of moved on to the energy industry. Right before coming to Vicarious Surgical, I was in the tech industry. So I've definitely seen a lot in my career, and that's part of the reason that I was drawn to Vicarious Surgical, because it does land in both camps, both the tech camp as well as the medical device camp. So that's one of the things that I love most about it. In terms of how I found my way to Vicarious Surgical, one of the things that I'm extremely passionate about is the opportunity to coach and work with founders and really help them bring their vision for their company to life. And so that's what I was doing before I joined Vicarious Surgical. In the tech company I was at, it was run by two MIT co-founders, and that was a really fun scale up. So joined that company when they were around 75 employees, was able to scale them up to over 350. Vicarious Surgical, a parallel to that, also two MIT co-founders. And when I joined Vicarious Surgical, they were around 50 employees, and they also had really exciting plans for a big growth trajectory. And so it was a little bit similar in that way. And so, reached out to the folks at Vicarious Surgical, had some really exciting early on conversations with Adam and Sammy and some other members of the management team. And because there were so many parallels between what I had just done in tech and what Vicarious Surgical was looking for, it ended up being a really good fit.
Well, you came aboard Vicarious actually August 2020. So 2 years ago, if I'm doing my math right, almost 2 years ago.
Exactly. I'm coming up on that 2-year mark.
Wow. So set the scene for me, if you will. What is Vicarious's size currently, and what are your needs for growth? Are you looking to fill positions? Are you hungrily looking to fill positions? Describe your current situation.
We are always looking to fill positions. So it's always an exciting growth journey. But we are at the 200 mark, and that is inclusive of our campus cohort. So we have a campus cohort, which is a mix of interns and co-ops, which is about 15. And so they're with us, they're included in that 200 number. And so we do new hire introductions at all of our town hall meetings. And our most recent one was our biggest cohort of new hires to welcome to the company. And it was a cohort of about 24 individuals, a mix of campus and full-time employees. So that was really cool because we invite everyone up to the front of the room and they get to tell us a little bit about who they are, what teams they're joining, and what they're going to be doing with us. Mm-hmm. In terms of where we're expanding most right now and the roles that we're trying to fill, I'd say it's definitely within our research and development organization. So those, really challenging to fill positions, a lot of engineering openings, some in the clinical development space, others in the robotics and control space. So it's really niche talent, but we're excited to keep turning over rocks, looking for the best talent, and hopefully bringing some individuals on who are going to be an awesome fit for us.
That's great. How are you competing, or what other industries are you competing with to draw talent? Are you competing directly with other tech companies, maybe non-robotics companies? Are you only competing with robotics companies? Are you competing? I imagine you must be to a degree with medical device companies.
It feels like we're competing with everyone. So we're absolutely competing with other medical device companies. We're competing with other tech companies, though I'd say tech is slowing down a little bit right now just because of the state of the economy. A lot of the tech companies are absolutely going through unfortunate rounds of layoffs. So recently seen more tech talent come to the market that is sort of more open to job searching right now. And the reason I say we're competing with everyone is because certainly some of those huge names out there we absolutely compete with. Amazon, Google, Tesla, those big names, we're absolutely finding ourselves in competitive situations with some of those large companies as well.
And let me see, how are you positioning the company in competing with those larger players? Do you find the MedTech medical device card one that could be played successfully to entice people, as you were, to sort of join a company with a mission beyond just creating the next new browser, or whatever they create now? I'm dating myself, but does a medical device sort of point sell these days to folks?
Yeah, Tom, I would say absolutely. It's a huge part of the sell. And one of the really cool things is that I think about our talent acquisition team as well as our hiring managers. And so many of those folks are coming from the med tech space themselves. And so they've experienced that passion and magic and mission-driven organization firsthand. And so when I listen in on their calls, when they're talking to candidates, or if I hear about how they're positioning it, that comes through in their conversations. Even if they're talking to a candidate who's never worked in medical device or a similar industry. And so the way they talk about it, it's so vivid that the candidates get really curious about what they're describing and how they're describing the difference of working in a mission-driven organization. And oftentimes those talent people and the hiring managers, they're talking about their own first experience working in a mission-driven organization. And so it's genuine and it's authentic and it's real. And I think that's one of the things that candidates look for most. They're looking for connection and they're getting excited by the stories of others who have experienced that. So I'd say the mission piece is critical in our ability to get talent interested. And then I think there's a whole host of other things that go along with the mission. For example, the culture that we've been able to build at Vicarious Surgical, as well as the people and the amazing team that they make up here.
So let's talk a bit about that culture. What type of atmosphere or setting are you creating for folks? And what do you think people are finding attractive?
So it's impossible to talk about the culture here without first talking about just how collaborative it is. And that's one of the things that I heard on the way in. And then as soon as I got here, as soon as I came in the door, I experienced it firsthand myself. And so that's one of the things that I feel the energy, I feel the collaboration, I see it every day. And a way that I see it every day and that I've experienced it multiple times here at Vicarious Surgical, you think about those ad hoc conversations that happen when people are in the office, and we're a hybrid work model. So those sidebar conversations still happen. You might be in a group of 5 people and, a topic relevant to people and culture comes up. If I'm not there or a member of my team isn't there, those 5 people will say, you know what, this really relates to people and culture. We should really bring Emma in or a member of the team. And I've seen that happen so much here. And it just speaks to how collaborative people are, how thoughtful they are to make sure that the right people are in the right conversations. So that's number one. I'd say the other 2 things that stand out in my mind about the culture here, we're absolutely a company that tends to attract people that love to learn. And so that also results in us having a lot of people who are really passionate about teaching others because they're so interested in learning themselves. Even though they're busy, they are more than happy and excited if you come by to tell you what they're working on. And then the third thing I'd say, which brings me back to my time in tech, is that we also tend to attract people that like setting really ambitious goals and working for a company that sets ambitious goals. And so we have that cool, fast-paced culture that you tend to find in the tech industry.
Yeah. Do you find the medical device industry obviously has to answer to the FDA and other regulatory bodies that the tech industry doesn't need to? They just have to really speak to the market. Is that something that people find to be a hindrance, to be a reason not to become involved with medical devices? Has that ever come up at all? And do you ever lose a candidate because of that?
So it's a really good question, and it's an interesting one. I have not had it come up in an interview with a candidate before. I think it probably depends on what positions they're interviewing for. And also when I think about the teams within Vicarious Surgical, I certainly think there's some teams that if you join them, they're almost like microculture within our larger culture tends to skew a little bit towards that traditional medical device feeling than other teams. And so it very much depends on what team you're looking to join in terms of how much the FDA and those regulations might impact your day-to-day or how quickly you can work, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So 2 more questions. Number 1, I've used the engineers term kind of blanket, but what type of engineers are you most in need of or looking to bring in most? Are they software? Are they hardware? A mixture of both?
Yeah, I would say absolutely a mixture of both, but I would love to continue bringing in more software engineers. I'd say that's where our primary focus is right now.
Interesting. Okay. And finally, you alluded to this earlier. You've got a hybrid system there set up. My question is, post-COVID, how have you sort of handled things? Did you go work from home entirely, even though I know you had fewer people when the lockdown first started? How did the office setup change since August 2020? Are you back to work full-time in the office? How are you operating going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were never 100% remote. Mm-hmm. So throughout the pandemic, we always had at least a handful of people in the office. These were mainly the folks in our R&D division. And so the cool thing about that was it felt very much like a seamless transition when we decided to bring more of the teams back to the office. There wasn't this stark contrast of the whole team is 100% remote and now we're going to bring people back. And so it coincided with one of the exciting events for us. So when I first started in August 2020, we were in a Charlestown, Massachusetts office. Then when we decided to bring people back in April of the following year, we were announcing our new building in Waltham, Massachusetts. And so that's around the time we started to bring more teams back to the office, which was really cool because we had a kickoff event to open our Waltham office. It was outside, so people felt more safe during COVID. And people were just so curious and excited to see what the new space looked like. It was actually a draw for people to come into the office. Mm-hmm. And since it was a new building, we had plenty of space. So socially distancing was really easy in our new building. And so honestly, I feel like we are so lucky in that regard because our employees did such an amazing job at helping us bring them back to the workplace. And it was just smooth. And I'm so grateful for that. In terms of where we are now, we very much talk about it as a flexible model. So we're a hybrid work model, but it's really around flexibility for our employees, meaning that most employees are in the office, I'd say at least 2 to 3 times per week, some more, but it's really role dependent and it's also dependent on your personal life. So the reason I keep emphasizing flexibility is because that's what we found people want most in today's world. So when I think of flexibility, things that come to mind for me are make sure you're home at dinner time to have dinner with your close connections. And one of the things that I've also noticed at Vicarious Surgical, which I haven't experienced so much at other companies, is people are really open about their calendars. So I'll pop on someone's calendar and I'll see, daycare drop off or walk dog. Mm-hmm. Or run and gym. And it's just an open culture that way. And
they don't just put out like I do.
Yeah. It's like a weight is lifted because we recognize that we're people and it's okay to have a life. And as long as you're getting your objectives checked off, that's what's most important. So we have an OKR setting model, objectives and key results. And I honestly think that's one of the reasons we're able to have so much flexibility is because we're setting those OKRs on a quarterly basis. Everyone knows exactly what they're accountable for, and they set the deadlines, whether it's a commitment or a stretch. And as long as you're progressing and achieving those, we trust people to manage their own lives. And a lot of times that does mean flexibility.
That's very healthy. Speaking of your offices, you're in the former Boston Dynamics building. So very kind of cool legacy building there. And I'm glad you're in there. But will you hire someone from Boulder or San Francisco to work there? Or do you have to be able to come in a couple of times a week?
We do have a handful of employees who are remote. So yes is the answer. We would absolutely consider candidates in other locations. We've had some candidates relocate to the Boston area. And we also have some candidates who are out of state who come and visit the Waltham headquarters on a certain cadence.
Interesting.
Final question about opportunity. What is the best way if someone's listening to this and they're interested in applying for a job? What's the most effective way to cut in line and become first and to get hired at Vicarious Surgical? What's the front door and what's an interesting side door story? Any interesting stories as to how people found employment there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'd say the best way to get to the front of the line is finding one of our talent acquisition partners on LinkedIn. They're all extremely active. They love having conversations with the new connections. And so they're constantly posting new jobs online. Our head of talent acquisition, her name's Alina Lizenki. You can also find her online. And so that's my number one recommendation is either make a direct outreach to one of our talent acquisition professionals, or even better, if you have someone in your network who works at Vicarious Surgical, we have a really strong employee referral program. And in our recent new hire cohort, 5 of those 24 were from employee referrals. And so it's always great if you can find someone in the company that you know. Side door stories. I would love to hear what other companies' side door stories are. None come directly top of mind, but one of the cool things that I will shout out, which was really fun and interesting to participate in, a company called Jammer. I recently made a video for one of the roles that I'm hiring, which is a senior HR business partner. It got posted on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, as soon as that was posted on LinkedIn, and it's sort of like a new format for posting jobs, the influx of applications just went through the roof. And so I'm very excited to see if the hire I end up making for that business partner role is a result of that video that was posted, which you can see on my LinkedIn profile. It's still up there. It's only about 2 weeks old. And so it's something new that we're trying. But I can say so far, signs are pretty positive.
I will take a look and I'll share it on my network too. And let's see what happens. Let's blow up the internet. So fantastic. Well, Emma, great stuff. As I said, I've been a fan of Vicarious since talking with Adam Sachs a couple of years ago. And I look forward to following your success and progress going forward.
Awesome, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the conversation today.
All right, Chris Newmarker. Now let's roll into an unfortunate number one on the Newmarkers Newsmakers.
Yes. Number one on the list, we've got FDA saying that, they have reports of 44 more deaths in the Philips, CPAP ventilator respiratory devices recall. So, it's just getting more serious all the time. At this point now, FDA's death reports, deaths related to this recall are up to 168. There've been 69,000 medical device reports filed related to the recall. And Philips is still very much, working through the recall right now, which involved millions of devices. They put them out of the respiratory devices market, and this comes on, at about the same time Philips said they're going to be doing a change in the corner office.
Right?
They're going to be promoting Roy Jacobs into the to be their new CEO. They're going to have a special shareholders meeting coming up, and then if all goes as planned, he'll take over the company October 15th. And Jacobs has been the company's connected care chief business leader, but back in June 2021, he took over responsibility for handling the Respironics recall. So yeah, he'll be. He's been managing this recall for them, and now he's going to be running the whole show over at Philips.
There will be a lot of eyeballs on him, sure, come October 15th when he takes over, and not under the most ideal circumstances, but hopefully Philips can and Roy Jacobs can find a way to turn things around.
Yeah,
quickly.
I suspect he has a lot to do right now, but it'd be great to get him on here, eventually to talk about what he's doing with the company.
Absolutely, for sure. All right, Chris Newmarker, great stuff as always. Like we said, we're going to stop at the top 3.
And I've got one more thing to add here.
Go ahead.
One more thing. We've got, we're actually working on a roundup of surgical robotics companies to watch. Just basically the, companies that have been getting a lot of headlines in MassDevice over the past year or so in the surgical robotics space. So watch out for that rolling out any day now, on MassDevice.
That's great. And we unrolled or rolled out our draft agenda for Device Talks West. It's happening on October 19th and 20th. You can find the agenda on devicetalks.com. And it is Friday the 19th. Our early bird rate is expiring the next day or so. So if you want to save some money on registration, please do not delay. Register for Device Talks West. Again, go to devicetalks.com for more information.
Got to be there or be square.
Perfectly said. Well, Elizabeth Steele, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Thanks for sharing your story about what you're doing, the lengths you're going to recruit new workers. But before we get into that, I think it would be really helpful for folks to learn what Microspec does.
Well, we specialize in advanced medical extrusion services, and we extrude precision medical parts that are among the smallest and most complex in the industry with some of the tightest tolerances. I call us the mission impossible of extrusion because we like to be at the innovative edge of coming up with new ideas that will support our customers, who are among the foremost suppliers of medical devices in the world. But we also then transition and support our customers from that innovation into high volume production. And we have played pivotal roles in the development of the PICC catheter business with CR Bard to launch that during the late 90s. And Tim here, who started the company and happens to be my husband, extruded the first dual lumen PICC catheter early on. And so he has always gravitated towards being at the cutting edge of the next technology. Mm-hmm. And we pride ourselves on operating in that niche. We do single lumen, multi-lumen, thin wall, profiles. We specialize in all of those areas. And in addition to caring about the quality of our product, we care about our associates, our customers, and we're very committed as a company to being socially responsible and to making sure that we are impacting our community and the world in a positive way and hopefully making it a better place in the process.
Oh, interesting. Well, we'll get into way you're looking to do that with this project, but let's talk a bit about your growth. Just in general, how have things gone over the last couple of years, knowing that question includes a couple of really rough and tumble years? How was Microspec doing prior to COVID, and sort of how have you done through in quote unquote post, or whatever era we want to call what we're in right now?
Yeah, well, so prior to COVID, we were doing very well, and we were growing and developing our R&D business and continuing to support our high volume production. And then COVID hit. And obviously, all of us were unprepared for everything that would be coming, but there were some silver linings we discovered during the process. So when COVID hit, we were one of the companies that were essential, and we continued to work through that time without any clear understanding of what might be coming our way. So it was a very scary time for the company, who wanted to make sure our employees were protected, and for employees who were worried about their health. But we implemented and spent about $800 to $1,000 per employee instituting a bunch of safety measures, including the plexiglass barriers. Obviously, we had masks for people. We also hired an in-house custodian so that we could sanitize surfaces. We had UV HEPA air filtration put throughout the building. We created heating pods, and we got electrostatic sprayers as well. And we're proud of the fact that we never had an in-house spread of COVID. Our associates made a lot of sacrifices to keep themselves safe. And although some people chose to stay home for a short period of time, the majority of people were working during all of that time. And we were able to keep paychecks flowing and plastic flowing, and our customers supported. I will say that during that time, for the first time ever, because typically when there's a downturn in the economy, Microspec has been protected because we're making devices that are helping people. And unfortunately, people get sick during downturns in the economy. But in this case, hospitals shut down elective surgery, and a lot of our parts go into elective surgery. Our production business went down, but at the same time, R&D boomed. So we were very busy with prototype business. And that business, although the production business fell about 40%, R&D took its place. And so we stayed flat revenue-wise that year. But as I said, we're busy. So people started coming back.
How are things? Yeah, let's talk now that we're through, hopefully. Well, whatever we were through. I'm always careful to say where we are, but how are things looking now for Microspec?
Well, yeah, a year ago when people were feeling more comfortable with everything, our R&D continued to boom. Production work came back with a bang, as if to make up for lost time. And so we were never busier than we were last year. We grew over 28%, and we were still understaffed because we had lost some people in terms of their choosing not to come back to work. But the silver lining is that the people that were at work and the managers here discovered efficiencies, and we were able to manage this increased growth with our current team. But unfortunately, we couldn't find people who we could hire during that time either. It was very unexpected because typically we would hire people without an issue, and we have a very high retention rate, and our typical tenure is over 8 years for employees on average, which is very high. And we typically don't have a churn rate. If we hire people, they stay. And so that was very unexpected that we weren't able to attract talent.
No, I think a lot of people have been caught by surprise. But how are things? I'm just curious. We were hearing about the shortage in personnel. And before we get into all of that, tell folks where you're located. You're kind of in a tucked away spot.
That's true. We're in southwestern New Hampshire and Peterborough, New Hampshire. We're about an hour and 50 minutes from Boston. We're an hour from Manchester and Concord and Nashua, larger cities in New Hampshire. And we're about 40 minutes from Keene, New Hampshire, medium-sized city. So we're all a small town, and it is harder to find people there. And we have quite a few larger businesses, manufacturing businesses in the area as well, who are also competing for our labor force.
That certainly makes it more challenging. How have the last couple of months been since the economy's taken its turn? We keep hearing about the labor market sort of drying up a bit and open positions drying up a bit. Have you felt any slowdown? Have you changed your projections at all?
So we are enjoying an uptick in hiring recently, and we attribute it to several different initiatives we did. So we realized that we were not being successful with our traditional way of hiring. And we also realized that with inflation as well, that we needed to be really encouraging to our staff who were here and also to hiring new staff. So we increased our entry rate by 18%, which was somewhat driven by some research we had been doing 6 months previous that had told us that we were out on a trip in Montana with an Uber driver. And he said he was thinking of moving over to McDonald's because they had just raised their rate to $25 an hour, which shocked us. And he said also that his parents worked in real estate, and they were busy with seasonal employers who were buying property to build housing for seasonal workers because they could attract enough people, even with an increased labor rate, into the area. So they needed to build housing and add that to sweeten the deal. So we had been aware of that, and we started talking about, well, if that's happening, we're going to have to think about wage changes ourselves. And that's what led us to increase the entry rate. And of course, we increased the rates across the company to retain our team, who we value. And then we started thinking about what more we could do. And the hiring practice, when you do get somebody interested in a job, there's not a whole lot of time. Our typical hiring process pre-COVID had taken 3 to 4 weeks with a test that people would take when they came in in-person interviews and sometimes a callback. And we realized we didn't have the opportunity to take that long. We had to act quick if we had a good candidate. So we added onto our HR platform a text messaging capability that allowed us to increase the lead time or decrease the lead time. So it takes 1 week to hire an employee now through the text messaging and the Zoom meetings, which we can do much more quickly than in-person interviews. And that, coupled with the increase in entry rate, coupled with the fact that we pay 100% health care insurance and have other really good benefits, has attracted talent. And we have been hiring at least 10 employees in the last 3 months and are still in an active hiring process right now. In fact, we've grown out of space and we're still understaffed, and we're looking to hire 20 to 40 more people in the next 2 years.
Amazing. So, and I know you took that conversation with the Uber driver in Montana to heart with the discussion about real estate. Talk a bit about what you folks are doing in that regard. I think that's really a fascinating and forward-thinking approach.
So we did find that the new protocols we were following for hiring were working, but we still know that we have a limited labor market here. And we were also hearing from our current staff about, especially the ones who were renting, that their rents had gone up quite a bit, often without notice, and they were struggling. And we know people here on staff that are trying to buy homes and there are no homes available. So those things just for our staff are concerned, but as well, in terms of attracting talent into the area, they were going to find the same issues: limited rentals, limited housing. So we started thinking about what Montana was doing, some of the employers out there, and thought, well, we need to get land or a building for a second microspec facility, because we need to have a high volume facility for the business that is coming at us in the next 2 to 4 years. But as well, we need to see if we can address the housing deficit in the area. Mm-hmm. And we've discovered a piece of property that was 113 acres just a mile down the road. And we purchased that, and 13 acres is for commercial, is zoned commercial, and 100 acres is zoned residential. Tim wants to call it the 100-acre woods after Winnie the Pooh. And so we are going to be building our new facility on the part of the 13 acres. And we are actively working right now with planners and lawyers and architects and engineers on developing workforce housing on that 100 acres.
And what do you think it's an interesting approach, because we think of the housing being more of a challenge down in densely populated areas like where I am, or more outside of Boston than where I am. I'm farther outside of Boston, where there's just a tight supply of housing. And it sounds as if you have a similar situation up there in Peterborough, but you also have, I guess, the good fortune of having a lot of land available around there. Is it any idea what's holding the housing supply back there if you have all this room to build?
Well, actually, Peterborough and this area, the Monadnock region in general, is often considered a best kept secret.
Yeah.
And people value their privacy. They value having a lot of land. We don't have a lot of properties available, and we don't have a lot of land available either. So that is part of the challenge. A lot of land is in conservation. There are a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah, it's the same situation. Still a dearth of available land for housing. So what do you see it looking like ultimately? Do you have a sense of whether these are going to be homes that you build and sell to employees or rent to employees? Are we thinking about townhouses, maybe shared buildings, with multiple units in them? Do you have a sense of what this might look like?
It's still the planning phase, obviously, but we're looking at doing a variety of options there. We hope to have workforce housing that's rental as well as ownership models. There might be some apartments, but we prefer the townhouse look and feel for families. And then we would also hope to have some single family homes built in the future. So this is obviously a 2 to 5 or longer year plan, as it will take some time to develop and design everything. We're also actively applying to the state for some funding the governor got from the federal government to incentivize workforce housing. So that application process is starting this fall. But even without that support, we're hopeful that we will get some support there. But even without that, we have a lot of excitement in the community about this effort. A lot of other businesses also need workers and think this is a really creative way of attracting them into the community. So we may even partner with some local businesses on the development of that land.
And final question, how do you see this sort of fitting in your day-to-day? I know for a fact that you're already a very busy person. Do you see something like this that you'll partner with someone who will sort of manage the whole thing? Or are you going to include sort of overseeing construction as part of your responsibilities as a company? How does this fit into what your full-time job is?
That's a great question, Tom. And I haven't figured that out yet, because it's a lot, and it's totally a new venture for us. We have never been in the real estate development business. We do have a lot of great consultants that are advising us and supporting us. And I think ideally we would probably have a project manager that would be coordinating that during this process. So that would be my goal, but it is very exciting, and it really fits into our commitment to be socially responsible. We want Peterborough to be proud of the housing that we design and build, and we're excited that we're going to be able to support families in coming to the Peterborough area or relocating from where they are now to new housing. And that really underscores our wanting to make the world a better place and supporting our employees in that process.
That's great. Well, you're clearly connected to the area. I'm just curious, have you had the conversation of moving to where more people are ever come up, or that's not an option for you?
That's funny that you should say that. But Tim, who founded the company, as I mentioned, is my husband. He likes living in the middle of nowhere. Not the middle of nowhere, but he likes being as far away from cities as possible. Yeah. So that's never an option. So the challenge was always going to be, how are we going to find talent as we continue to grow? Because although we need 20 to 40 people over the next 2 years, there are businesses in the area that need up to 200 people. So we're, it's going to be a very competitive hiring market right now. And those are neighboring companies. As we all are growing, which is a good thing, but we have a limited labor source in the area. So hopefully the housing will attract more people into the community and help all of our companies continue to grow.
That's great. Well, if anyone is listening and is interested in living in such a place, I can vouch for being a beautiful part of the country. So make sure you check out Peterborough and the Peterborough area. All right, Elizabeth. Well, great stuff. Thanks for sharing your plans on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Tom, and take care.
All right, Chris Newmarker. That wraps up another episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Where can folks find you on social media? You've been posting some really great stories from MassDevice, so they should certainly be connecting.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. You can also find me on Twitter at Newmarker. Always happy to talk with people. And what's the other thing we remind people?
We would like them to
like, follow, subscribe.
That's exactly right. Regarding this podcast, like, follow, and or subscribe on every podcast player you can think of. We're on there. If you subscribe to the Device Talks Podcast Network, you'll not only receive future episodes of this fine podcast, but also Stryker Talks and Intuitive Talks. And we'll be posting a Stryker Talks episode very soon with their head of trauma and extremities. So make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss that. And again, future episodes, but also while you're in the subscribing mood, subscribe to Medtronic Talks. They have their own channel on all those same podcast applications, and you'll receive 2 episodes of Medtronic Talks every month. So you can, of course, find them all on DeviceTalks.com, but why not let us send it directly to you? Make it easy on yourself.
That's right.
Why create work? I don't get it.
Right.
You want to listen.
Exactly.
Just push a button.
That's right.
That's all it takes.
Just push the button and it arrives to you.
It arrives to you. It's like faster than Amazon's one click. And you don't have to wait a day. It comes right to your phone, and there's no boxes to recycle. It's perfect.
What's that razor business that sends you the razors every week?
Oh, isn't that Harry's?
There you go. It's like hair. Yeah, you don't
Harry's.
Need to go
Harry's, but with podcast. Yeah.
Buy a razor. So the blades are coming, manufactured in some super duper German plant. It's great. It's awesome. Do it.
Just like Harry's. All right. And of course, as I mentioned, the agenda for Device Talks West is up. Go to devicetalks.com for more information about that. And we're kicking off our Device Talks Tuesdays season.
Yes.
On Tuesday, we'll have a great panel featuring our old friend Bill Benton and S3 Connected Health.
Oh, fantastic.
Talking about healthcare at home. So it's actually a lot of registrations. People are fired up and ready to go. So don't miss that episode of Device Talks Tuesday.
Bill's an incredibly knowledgeable person, so it'll be a good talk.
And a super nice man.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure to talk to. Yes. All right. That is a wrap, Chris Newmarker. Thanks for all the great Newmarkers Newsmakers. And of course, thanks to everyone for tuning into this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of this podcast sent directly to you.
Take care, everybody. Have a good summer.